We have all been hearing it. Climate change can cause a disruption to our typical weather patterns, and generally speaking, most of us have noticed the shift. Warm weather in particular, along with the melting of ice caps and the evaporation of bodies of water, have resulted in a large number of discoveries being made. Most notably might be the sheer number of bodies being found on Everest. While more are added every year, at the same time, more and more are discovered, and the question is raised: who are these people and how long have they been here? But Everest is not where we are going for this story, nor was there a question of who this person was. For when Marta Altamirano was found, authorities and her family were able to identify her immediately, despite her body being lost for 42 years. Welcome back to Tragedy with a View, and welcome to our second Free Solo Friday episode where I venture out on my own without a co-host and provide you with a short story to be enjoyed while you're waiting on the bigger episodes that we do every other week. I am your host, Kayla, and I want to take a moment to thank you for joining me today. I've been in a season of appreciation lately, if you can't tell between Wednesday's episode and this episode's intro. Thank you for being here. Just a quick reminder, there is an exclusive episode up on Patreon and for Apple subscribers, and we still have sizes left in pretty much all of our shirt and sweater options in most of the colors. Link will be in the show notes or the episode description. You're welcome to check those out. So here we go. The Andes mountain range is the longest in the world, and it has some of the tallest mountains contained in it. The mountain range runs along the western edge of South America and begins in Venezuela and ends in Chile at the very tip of the continent. Cerro Mercadario is the tallest mountain in the Cordillera de la Ramada range in Argentina, South America, near the border of Chile, and it is the 8th tallest mountain in all of the Andes. Interestingly, Cerro translates roughly into hill, not mountain, but Mercadario rises to 6,770 meters or 22,211 feet. So it is clearly a mountain. The mountain was first summited in 1934, and in 1972, Inca ruins were found beneath the summit, which I think is pretty cool. The mountain does not require a permit to climb. There is no short or easy approach or climb to get to the summit, and there is no real base camp either. While the summer months have the mountain mostly free of snow, hard and fast gusts of wind blast the ridges year-round, making this a difficult climb even when there is no snow and ice. And just a real quick blip, I want to mention that several years ago, some friends and I climbed Slieve League in Ireland, which is very small in comparison. It stands only at 1,900 feet or 600 meters, and my friends and I took a little bit less of a traditional approach, and when we came over the ridge, I was almost blown over from the wind, so I can't imagine what the wind would be like on a mountain that's 10 times the size of Slieve League. This mountain is pretty mild risk-wise in comparison to Everest, Annapurna, and Mount Kilimanjaro. However, due to the elevation, you are still at risk for heart failure, falling, hypothermia, and exposure to the elements, and that's on top of altitude sickness and edema, which we discussed a little bit in episode 14 that was done on Denali. If you want to hear more about altitude sickness and edema and how it affects your brain and your lungs and your body, you're welcome to go back and listen to that. When it comes to Everest, there is a lot of debate on if allowing people to climb is being done in the right way and if these actions can be carried down to smaller mountains as well. Some feel that too many inexperienced people are on the mountain, and this is not only causing a larger risk to those inexperienced people, but it also puts everyone else on the mountain at risk too, even the more experienced climbers and also the guides. Fortunately, Mrstdarjo is not highly trafficked like Everest is, but if someone died on the mountain, you still need a team of several people who are willing to put their own lives at risk to recover the body. Additionally, the costs associated with removing a body from a mountain are in the thousands of dollars. There are many mountaineer traditions that have mountaineers asking to be left where they fall if they are to die on the mountain. However, with climate change, shifting weather patterns, and causing a warm-up globally, this also means that bodies are no longer being preserved in the ice, but rather they are decomposing and starting to have an effect on the surrounding environment, which that effect is not a positive effect. Marta Emilia Altamirano, also known as Patty, and her sister Corina grew up in the Tucumán province of Argentina, and their grandparents owned a farm in Benjamin Paz, which is where they really grew to love the mountains. They planned their trip to climb Mrstdarjo in March, which means that they would encounter temperatures in the range of 34 degrees Fahrenheit to 58 degrees Fahrenheit, or 1 degree Celsius to 14 degrees Celsius. There would be a low amount of precipitation, with the average of only 3 days of precipitation for the entire month, which means that mostly they would have sunny skies and tolerable wind speeds ranging from 3 to 7 miles per hour or 5 to 11 kilometers per hour. For 2 years, Patty and her sister Corina prepared for their trip to climb Mrstdarjo by climbing every peak that was in Tucumán. They learned how to properly assess risk and how to handle ice and snow at higher elevations, which is a huge accomplishment for 20-year-old Patty and Corina. Though they were not twins, they were close in age and even closer in their relationship. On March 23rd, 1981, Patty, Corina, and Sergio sent off for their adventure. Now, I saw several sources that say Sergio was her boyfriend. Whose boyfriend? That's unclear. But there are also other sources that named Sergio as their guide, and since he was an experienced mountain climber, and because he was only with them for the first portion of their climb before the two girls were to set off on their own, I am personally going to lean towards that he was not Patty or Corina's boyfriend, but rather their guide. If a relationship was formed out of that, it'll be what it is. But I do not see anything that Sergio was actually in a relationship with either of the girls. The trio stopped for the night at the Hornadillas area, which had a military base nearby. The next day, they arrived at the base of the glacier that rose 3,400 meters or 14,100 feet into the air, which was located on the south side of the mountain. Once they reached about 5,000 meters or 16,400 feet, a lack of oxygen can start to include symptoms such as fatigue, headaches, lightheadedness, shortness of breath, equilibrium and balance issues, and these are all also known as mild onset symptoms for altitude sickness. On March 27th, they were finally on the mountain and working their way up the first of 3 days it would take to make it to the summit. It was about 7 p.m. and at nearly 6,000 meters or 19,700 feet, Patty, while Corina and Sergio set up their tent, went to explore a bit and look around. And whether it was on purpose or by accident, she went into a more technical area, and that's where the ground gave way beneath her feet and she fell into a crevasse. Corina and Sergio had no idea what happened, and when Patty didn't return, they started to get really worried. The ground was slick and hard and covered in a layer of ice rather than snow, and as darkness was approaching, they decided that they needed to go looking for Patty. But between darkness approaching and some weather fronts rolling in, they couldn't find her and they started to fear for their own safety and retreated back to the tent. The following morning, they started searching again as soon as they were up, and unfortunately, they found Patty. She was several hundred feet down from where they had set up camp and was laying face down inside of a crevasse that had opened between a moving and non-moving wall of ice. Corina and Sergio were unable to make their way down to her, and they started screaming and trying to get her, or trying to figure out if she was alive. And she did not move or respond in any way, and with the location being nearly impossible for themselves to access, to be able to get to her and check on her and potentially remove her body, and because they also did not have the appropriate equipment to be able to carry her down the mountain, they decided to pack up and leave the mountain for help, which was a 2-day trek away. On March 29th, Corina and Sergio arrived at the military post in the Hornadillas area and reported that Patty had fallen and died. They provided her approximate location, but again, by the time rescuers arrived to recover her body, weather had rolled in and either buried her or potentially opened the crevasse even more, and Patty was nowhere to be found. Due to the harsh weather conditions, recovery efforts were suspended as to not put anyone else at risk. Several months later, in December of 1981, a helicopter flew over the mountain and confirmed that the location Patty's body had been in had opened into a new and deeper crevasse. Over the course of the following few years, 3 more attempts were made by authorities to locate and recover Patty's body, and no one was able to find any evidence of her being there or where her body may have gone. Patty's father, who was a retired police officer, would return to the mountain again and again to search for his missing daughter until he passed away in the town she had visited last before attempting to climb Mustario. But Patty would not be lost forever. 42 years later, on January 28th of 2023, at 5,000 meters above sea level, a group of mountaineers found a body encased in ice on a wall of one of their paths. The glacier that had been holding Patty's body hostage had begun to collapse and revealed her to daylight once again. The mountaineers reported what they found to authorities when they got off of the mountain, and a helicopter was sent to get an exact location. Later, a helicopter returned to recover the body. The initial review by the coroner stated that the woman was between 18 and 30 years old, and from the injuries, they could tell that the woman was climbing the most difficult side of the mountain, which is the south side. Along with blunt force trauma from a fall, the woman was also missing one of her feet. Based on what the woman was wearing, authorities knew who to contact, and when Patty's family arrived, they had no doubt in their mind that their beloved sister had been found. Still, DNA results were required, and on February 7th, 2023, it was confirmed that Patty's body had indeed been found. Patty had told Corina that when she died, she wanted to be buried in the cemetery of Andinistas, which sits at the base of the Andes Mountain in Mendoza, Argentina. This cemetery has become a popular place for hikers to be buried because of its location, and you don't have to die in the Andes to be buried here. You can request to be buried there even if you die elsewhere. For Patty, however, this was not the plan. Instead, her body was brought back to Tuchman's so that her family and loved ones could say goodbye before she was cremated, and her ashes were taken back to Mercedario, where she could rest permanently with the mountain. Finally, Mercedario now has a small memorial at its summit in memory of Patty. And that's the story of Patty. I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for listening, and we'll see ya in a couple of weeks. Thank you for listening. Please take a moment to rate and subscribe from wherever you listen to Tragedy with a View. To get access to ad-free episodes, bonus content, and more, please join us on our Patreon. The link will be in the show notes. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and to share a story of your own, send us a Campfire Confessional email at tragedywithaview@gmail.com. We'll see you next time.